Everyone has a story to tell. Welcome to Dingo Talk, where we explore the experiences that make us who we are. Here's your host, Carlo Guadagnino.
What's going on, Chuckleheads? I am Carlo Guadagnino. This is not Dingo Talk. This is From the Sidelines, a D3 Coaches Roundtable, presented by Dingo Talk. We're going to talk to 4 coaches in a very limited series. What I'm going to do is I'm going to intro each coach. They're going to talk about their programs, and then we're going to roll into the questions. So, starting us off, it's Coach Todd Parsons from Curry College. Coach, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me again, Carlo.
Tell us a little bit about Curry College.
Oh, perfect. Yeah, this is going to be going into season 4 for our staff. We're in the process of a rebuild, hopefully catching the upper end of that climb, going into this year. But Curry College is obviously a Division III private school located about 8 miles from downtown Boston on the South Shore. We can compete in the Conference of New England, which I think is one of the most competitive conferences in the Northeast. At one point, Curry College, and this was one of the big draws for me, having coached in this conference before at Salve and Endicott. One of the big draws for me is that Curry at one point was one of the premier programs, not just in the Northeast, but in the country. Back in the 03 to 08 and 37 conference wins and national playoff wins and top 25 rankings. It's been done at a really high level, and that's essentially our goal is getting back to that.
Well, thank you, Coach. Next up is Coach Dean Paul, the defensive coordinator at John Carroll University. Coach, welcome back. It's been a very long time. I think you're all the way back in season 1 of our coach's journey. Talk to us a little bit about John Carroll.
Yeah, thanks, Carl. You do great. This is distinguished, so glad to be part of the program. And our head coach, Jeff.
Coach, I think we're having a little bit of technical difficulties. We're going to come back to you. Next up is Coach Ray DeFrisco. Coach, welcome back, Paisan. Illinois College, how you guys doing?
Kisiriche, Paisan. How we doing, everybody? Yeah, I'm glad to be here with you guys, and I'm looking forward to learning something from the rest of the coach roundtable today. From Illinois College, myself, here in central Illinois, Jacksonville, Illinois. It's about 30 miles outside of Springfield, the state capital. We're members of the Midwest Conference. This school sits on a hilltop, which I'm hearing more and more about other campuses on hilltop. So it's not necessarily hashtag hilltop here, but the school has been around for the oldest in the state of Illinois, first to give out the baccalaureate degree. And there's a ton of history with, our part and the location of where, Abraham Lincoln walked and helped to abolish slavery. And there's tons and tons of, history with the Civil War and the Union soldiers. And that's where the Blue Boys come from. And so excited to be a part of the conversation today and looking forward to learning something.
Coach, again, thank you for coming back. And then lastly, Coach Mike Clark from Lycoming College. Coach, welcome back again. It's been a while. There we are. Coach Clark, are you back?
I'm sorry. I checked it. I thought I checked it ahead of time, man. And for whatever reason, our Wi-Fi just dropped there. So I apologize for that.
I understand. Well, tell us a little bit. Welcome back. Coach Paul, we will get back to you. I promise we'll work our way back up. We were having a hard time hearing you again. Coach Clark, tell us a little bit about Lycoming. Welcome back.
Thank you. Yeah, no, it's great to be back. Listen, Lycoming, small D3 private school, Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Most people probably are familiar with the Little League Baseball World Series, which is at least a point of recognition, in terms of our location. Awesome history and tradition. I've been the head coach here since 2008. Got to follow Coach Frank Girardi, who is a member of the College Football Hall of Fame, and we have an awesome history and tradition here at Lyco, and it's a great place to work. I'm fortunate to have played here, been an assistant here in the late 90s. and work with a ton of guys on our staff that had played here, at LICO, including Coach Weiser, our DC, who's going to coach his 52nd season this fall. So it's a great place. We're in the Landmark, which is a newer conference at the D3 level, but our league champion the last 2 years. Susquehanna was a Final Four team last year. And so while we were only 7 teams, it's a smaller conference. I think the quality of play in our league is pretty good.
Well, Coach, I would find a lot of people that would not disagree with you on the style of play that the Landmark brings. I'm happy to have everybody. Coach Paul, let's hear from you. All right, I think we're going to jump into a question, Coach. As soon as you get your microphone to where we can hear you, we'll pop you in, okay? All right, so our first question, Coach Clark, I'm going to start with you. What are the challenges of balancing competitive matchups when you're making the non-con schedule? Obviously, MPI and I know non-con schedules become very difficult the further you get into, week 2, week 3 seem to be a problem. What are some of the challenges that you guys find at LICO?
Well, it's been interesting, right? Because we were in the MAC forever, Carlo, and in the MAC, we didn't have a shortage of schools. We were full, and we could have essentially played a full conference slate if we wanted. So non-conference scheduling wasn't super difficult. Starting football on the Landmark has been tougher because it's a 10-member conference, but only 6 full-time members offer football, right? So now all of a sudden you're trying to find not just weeks 1 and 2, through weeks 3 and 4. The first 2 years of the conference, Keystone was an affiliate member. WestCon has since replaced them. Keystone's not going to play a varsity schedule this year, but you're still trying to find, games. So we've worked into some scheduling agreements the last couple of years. The first 2 years were with mostly the Empire 8. I don't love on a personal level. I'm from the Philadelphia area originally, so I don't love that the Landmark doesn't have a Philadelphia football school or a New Jersey football school. So we played Widener non-conference. This year we're going to play some NJAC schools to really try to, recruit an area, east of us and south of us that historically has been pretty good. So, sometimes you don't have a hand in those scheduling agreements. Like when we pieced it together the first time, I had agreed to play Widener, Brockport, and I'm forgetting maybe Utica, who at the time was talking about moving up to D2. And then they're like, well, for the agreement, we're going to give you Cortland, who went on to win the national championship that year. So it was, it was tough.
Right.
But that's okay. Listen, we've played good people. I've played Rowan. We played Ithaca in the past. We do a joint practice with them. So, I think within our footprint, as long as you're not flying, within 3-4 hours, I'll play. I'm open to playing anybody.
Coach Parsons, same question.
Yeah, I think obviously me maybe being a little newer to the head coaching scene here and trying to work the schedules out, that's something you kind of learn on the fly. And I was fortunate enough the first season, everything was kind of set in stone. But really when it came down to last year, the 2024 season, I think the challenges of some conference movement. We lost Salve Regina from our conference that year going into the new MAC. We had some contracts out for some teams, but their movement in their conferences forced them to kind of, go out of the way. And, there's only so many teams up here. And some teams in these conferences have crossovers, deals, which we do now have a little bit with the new MAC. But we were willing to play anybody. At that point, we were looking for 2 games in February or March of last year when those 2 teams lost, and we were able to fill those, and I think they were really tough teams. And we ended up picking up Ithaca, and then Hardin Simmons, as well, came up from Texas. We had Alfred State, who's a national playoff team in a non-conference, deal, and then Dean. But, us getting 2 teams back now coming into this season with, I shouldn't say back, well, back for Maine Maritime is bringing football back this year in our conference. And then New England College is a brand new program up here coming into our conference. So we're back to an 8-team conference now, which makes it a little bit easier. And then nothing's finalized, but we're pretty much working on a crossover deal with the NUMAC. Like we will be playing Coast Guard Academy and then Bridgewater State, but it can be challenging, if you don't have enough teams in your conference, and we're fortunate enough to get those, add 2 more to our conference, which helped out a lot.
Coach DeFrisco?
Yeah, I find scheduling to be one of the most challenging tasks as a head football coach. I mean, I wish someone would have told me to be thinking about things 5-6 years in advance. I mean, the first time someone told me what a home agreement was, I was like, oh, this is great. I get 2 home games back to back. I didn't even know what it was. It was crazy. But I think it's really difficult when there are the balance of home and home, and your budget and what you can afford. And, traveling for us is there's only a handful of games in our conference where we're going to take a day trip. The rest of them are most likely going to be overnight trips. And so,
right.
That plays a factor for us on, can we find a regional game that matches what we're looking for and how we want to compete? But I have found it very challenging because, when you find the right team that you want to, put on your schedule for non-con, at least in my experience, it was always hey, that's great, but I'm not available till 27 and you need a 26, 27 and you don't have it's hard to get a one and done. Although, as I say it, this year we're in a one and done for our first non-con with Greenville University, and that one kind of fell in my lap. We really didn't even have anybody till late this year with Greenville.
Wow.
So we were kind of debating on, what we were going to do if we chose not to play, or potentially look into the bye week, which I don't know, from everyone else's experience, it sounds like a couple of you guys may have longer non-conference, weeks than we do. But finding a week 3 game or a week 4 game just doesn't even sound possible in my mind, But it's kind of fun to navigate the competitions and the matchups and trying to find someone that is going to, at least on paper, put you in a very challenging position. And, the more things evolve with the playoffs and strength of schedule and things like that, I think that's also going to play a major factor in trying to find the right matchups in non-conference games.
Coach Paul, are you back with us?
Where's Travis
right.
James, Coach Paul? Get Travis James over there to get him working on that microphone for you.
Coach Parsons, how do you balance athletic and academic priorities when you're looking at a recruit?
Yeah, and I think this is, having experience at different schools and that kind of stuff. I think that's the one thing with every level really, but Division III, there's so many different standards, I guess, from school to school, that, can sometimes make it a little bit, maybe uneven in the recruiting field. But for us, I think any place that I've been that we've had success is, we had the right kids in the program that not only were the good football players, but were able to get the work done right in the classroom, and that's something that we make a strong push for in our recruiting, process, in looking at GPAs. I think everyone probably will say they're going to look for that 3.0 student, and that's where, we're going to try to hit that and go higher. Yeah. Can we get in lower? Yes. Right. But at the same time, like, that's where we need to make sure, maybe do a little bit more research on those kids that, we might have to go to bat for, right, with admissions, that they're actually going to be able to do the work and that we're not going to set them up for failure. But I think that's all part of the process. And, I talked about us kind of rebuilding this thing back up into what it once was. And it's about having the right guys in the program. And, we want to make sure we can take care of the stuff off the field right before we can really start winning on the field. And, I'll brag on our guys a little bit right now, but, every class that we brought in has had an average, cumulative GPA of coming out of high school over a 3.0. We have a cumulative GPA of over a 3.0 on our entire team, right now. We've put the highest GPA out in program history, at least on track for the last, 20 years. We put 22 guys on the CSC academic all district team, which is the most of any school in the conference. We had the scholar athlete of the conference for the first time in program history this year. So that's been a really big, priority. And I do really, truly believe, and, time will tell, but having those guys in place, that like the wins are going to start showing on the other end of this for us.
Follow-up question. Talk to us about what's a Curry man?
I think everyone throws that term blue collar, around, I think, but, we want someone that really understands what they're getting themselves into. We always talk about in recruiting, I'm sure everyone can say this, is a lot of guys like the idea of playing college football when they're coming out of high school and going through that recruiting process. And listen, we're guilty of it too. We do the photos and the graphics and everything like that, but we're clear with our recruits that, when a decision is made, that ends, at that point. Now it's time to kind of, really go to work and trying to find the guys that understand the big picture, right, in all this. There's going to be guys that have different experiences in at this, level. Some guys are going to be 4-year starters. Some guys may never play significant down, but, they're all important, right, in that program and in building and the success of the program in the end, on and off the field.
Coach DeFrisco, same question. First about the original question about the differences that you're looking for of balancing academics and athletics in your recruits.
Yeah, very, very challenging. We want to make sure that there's a commitment to academic excellence. They have that self-motivation, and we first of all, congratulations, Coach Parsons. That sounds amazing. Having a team GPA in college over a 3.0, I think, is a very underrated achievement. 3.0 of college kids, all from a football team. Congrats, Coach. Keep it up. We're close. We're like a 2.89 or something like that, but we're working our way up to the 3.0 mark. But I think it starts in that recruiting process and just being able to target and identify the guys that can be successful. Obviously, there's different tells at each institution that you're recruiting kids from that will give you some factors in identifying whether or not they're going to be successful. And sometimes that's not always the case. Sometimes they come in and they procrastinate, or they don't follow the path that we provide. And I think that our luxury, I think, for us, and I'm sure it is at the other schools that are on the call today, is the resources on campus once they get here. It's such a transition from high school to college, and the bell doesn't ring to tell them where to go anymore. They have to structure and organize their time and their day, and we're looking for guys that's going to translate. Their success in high school, yes, it just on paper will help us identify these factors. But when we really dig into the self-motivation and figuring out whether or not this is something that they want to do through our conversations, it becomes very imperative on whether or not they're going to be someone who's going to be successful in the classroom. And that all, translates to, how much we can count on the field. If they're going to be going to class and taking care of business, it really helps the coaching staff, continue to build faith in them to be able to put them into the right positions to, achieve the goals and have the success that you're looking for on the football field. So, but we've been able to attack that with a good understanding of what our academic profile is as an institution. Which type of student is going to be successful here? What are those test scores or GPAs or looking at core classes and types of classes and things like that are going to really be showing up when they get to the college level. That's a big factor for us, but they have to have that academic element. It's not just the ability. We have to make sure that they're going to be able to get admitted to the school, be admissible, and then be living up to the expectations of, scholar champion.
And follow-up question, what's an IC guy?
What's an IC guy? The blue boy, the IC guy, I guess to give you kind of like the prototypical profile, if you will, we are very, I use the term +1 and self-motivated quite a bit. For us, +1 is guys that just want to try to get better every single day, put their best version out there, give themselves the best opportunity to get the results that they want by being committed to the daily discipline it takes to be successful in college. Being a college student athlete is not easy to do. And, the expectations that we set for them are pretty high. So we're looking for self-motivated, young men and women that are committed to being their very best in everything that they do.
All right, Coach Clark, I'm going to ask you the same question. How do you balance the athletics and academic priorities when you're looking for a recruit?
Sure. I mean, look, I think we would all agree that we want to recruit as many talented players as possible. And then it really just comes down to, what do they look like academically? And as, Ray and Todd alluded to, you got to work with your admissions people. Are they admissible? How good are they if they're marginal, right? How committed to doing well in school? If you have to go to bat for those guys to try to get a kid into school who maybe is a little short of what your normal admissions standards may or may not be. At the end of the day, I always tell guys, you look, if we're any good, you're not going to play. You shouldn't play as a freshman. Now, we've played some freshmen the last couple of years, but when my teams are good, you want to win 8 games or more, then you're probably not playing many first-year guys. So their best years of football should be a couple of years down the line. Well, if you want to get there and become the best football player that you want to become, then you have to persist and you have to retain and you got to progress towards graduation. So that you can be a 21 and 22-year-old man, not some 18-year-old kid playing. So, I think that, that part matters. If they're marginal kids, I want to go to bat for high-impact guys, and if they perform well, our admissions offices may be a little more likely to have some flexibility for other riskier students. But if they don't do well, then we don't help them graduate or help them progress towards graduation. Then the likelihood is we're not going to get those guys, right? So I think you're really good. I'll go back. When I coached at Davidson, we always played Dayton, and Dayton was always kind of the standard in the Pioneer Football League. Man, there was rarely a sophomore in the 2 deep, and there was never a freshman, and they were always really good. I think you want guys that can do the work. At the end of the day, if you're good enough, someone will find you. We've never had a pro, but you're proud when everybody graduates, and that's really, I think, school needs to be important to them.
Mm-hmm. And then, as I asked everybody else, the follow-up question, what's a LICO guy?
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Carlo, we're kind of re-engaging on some things here, man. My through 2014, my first couple of years here, we were pretty good. Coach Girardi established an insane standard here in the 90s and 80s and 90s. I was lucky enough to play on a national runner-up team. And 21, we were good. Last fall was a long year for us. And I got to tell you, I struggled with it personally. And years ago, I used to read a mission statement to our team, which I updated. And for whatever reason, I stopped, and I probably never should have. And so now I kind of doubled down this spring. And, I tell our kids that we want a program full of men of character who are going to maximize their abilities academically, socially, and athletically, so that we can be a program that, our players, their families, our alumni, the community, the college community and the town of Williamsport are proud of. And I don't think we fit that definition last year. And if we're going to be 4-6, we're going to be 4-6 with people that are going to do stuff the right way.
Right.
Because 4-6 it's below average, right? So I don't care how talented you are individually, but we struggled with accountability last year. Played really well week 1 and just got dismantled in week 2, and we're really selfish on all levels. And ultimately, that's my responsibility. And if I'm going to go down, man, if we're going to struggle, we're going to struggle with kids that at least want to do stuff the right way, because it's not worth it. Otherwise, it's not fair to the kids that do stuff the right way.
I couldn't agree more. Coach Paul, let me try back again with you. Let's reintroduce yourself and let's talk about John Carroll for a second. All right, Coach, we're still missing you on there. Coach DeFrisco, what's a major lesson that you've learned coaching at the Division III level?
Any major lesson?
Mm-hmm.
I think one of the things that kind of stand out to me is just the relationships and the relationship building, and that those are some of the most important factors for these young men, for these coaches that come in and out. The ability to give your best to them, and then in return know that their relationships with one another, their relationships with their families have grown and strengthened and have gotten much better because of the culture and because of the things that you're asking of them. But I think that those relationships are critically one of the more influential lessons for me. Along with many others, but I think that's a big one. I think the relationships is something that these young men will take with them forever, and they'll wind up being best of friends. And I think that's how you recruit. I think that's how you retain. I think that's how you win championships, is with relationships and you being able to show vulnerability and show them that you care and show them you love them, and I think you get the most out of them that way.
Coach Parsons?
Yeah, to kind of carry on to what Coach DeFrisco was saying there, it's the relationships. And I think, one of the biggest things that coaching really at any level, not just the Division III level, but it's opened me up to such a diverse group from all kinds of different backgrounds, and honestly has made me who I am today, to be able to maybe understand the bigger picture, right, of where guys are coming from and different aspects. And, there's nothing better than the challenge as a coach or a program when you got all these guys coming from these different backgrounds to try to get them all to tie into one common goal, right, at the end. I always said, especially now sitting in the head coach chair for the last 3 years, it's certainly different, role from being a coordinator or position coach. And, I always kind of joke around with our coaches, and if I had to go back to school again, it wouldn't be a PE major that I would go to. It'd probably be something in the psychology route, and the more the conversations that we have behind closed doors that have absolutely nothing to do with football, what these guys got going on, at home, socially, changing, especially newcomers and, those changes that everything's new to them that first year away from home and going through it a little bit and being able to kind of, maybe talk some guys off the ledge, a little bit. I think it's made me more aware of things, and people in general.
Coach Clark?
Yeah, I would say two things. I'll build off of what Ray and Todd both shared next. But first of all, at this level, you're never going to have enough help, right? Like you look at higher levels, man, and my staffing situation here is pretty good, but we're still trying to fill 2 GA jobs that we don't even have grad school, right? They're like intern level jobs. And there's so many jobs now at the higher levels there people volunteer for and those kind of things. And so attracting and retaining good help at this level is really, really hard. But the goal is also hopefully to help younger coaches move on the way that I'm sure some of our mentors helped me move on and end up here. So, but you're never going to have enough help at this level as compared to other places, and that's okay. The relationship piece, I think, is wow. I really love Ray's answer. I mean, that's what really matters, man. The winning is important. But I've gotten a couple emails recently. It's funny, or text this spring from kids that have coached at Davidson 20 years ago. Very random, and it's just the timing for me was awesome because again, last year for us was hard, and so I have some great relationships with our kids here too. Multiple weddings, and one of our guys just went into our Hall of Fame, and that's awesome. But the last couple of years, I think on a personal level, maybe I lost sight of that some. And I think Ray says you have to let the kids show the kids you can be vulnerable. I think that's important, right? When we win, I feel great. When we lose, I hate it. But it's not all their fault. I like to say that if we win, I like to think I have something to do with it. But ultimately, I know that means when we lose, I absolutely have something to do with it, right? We're all in this together. It's the ultimate team sport. And I think building really good relationships with the kids and your coaches so that, they know you're there for them and you care about them is really, really important.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Coach Parsons, we're going to start with you for this one. What is a change that you would like to see in Division III football on a national level?
Yeah, I was reading this question, and maybe some of these other coaches can dial in on this one just a little bit more than me. But I know a lot of the talk is about the playoffs and the systems and the point system and NPIs and all that kind of stuff, and that's one thing. But like for us, in our conference and just like most of the conferences here, you win your conference, you get an automatic bid into the national playoffs. Like you got to beat everybody at the end of the day. So that doesn't play that big of a role in me. I don't know. It would never happen and it's impossible to do, but I do think some of the biggest challenges at the D3 level is, when you're talking about non-scholarships and that kind of stuff, it's such a wide range of schools and costs and that kind of stuff. And, it's not always an even playing field when it comes down to that and the financial aid and everything like that. And, I don't know if there is an answer right to that. I don't think it's impossible. But I think, that's one of the challenges that, present itself, and, like us being a private school and, maybe having to compete with some state schools, and there's a bunch of them up here, that creates some challenges. But, I think this level of football is as everyone usually says, the purest breed of it. You got the right kids that really want to play, and understand that there is a balance between the academics and the athletics, and they want to do it, and they're here for that reason. There's not a scholarship hanging over their head, forcing them to do it. So, not much I would honestly could change off the top of my head. I know maybe some other coaches have some different insight, but that's how I kind of look at it.
Coach Clark?
I would love to see a change in the off-season or non-traditional season. So I'm also the AD, right? Which makes following the rules for me during spring football really important. Okay.
Right.
I would just say, I get when they gave us 4 shoulder pad days, and I'm not trying to judge anybody, guys, right? But like this spring, people just putting stuff out on their team accounts where they're clearly playing 11 versus 11. And so just give it to us. If we're not going to administrate it as administrators or conferences, then just give us spring football. Go 12 days, make 8 days padded or something. Every other sport gets non-traditional seasons. That would be the one for me, because my kids send me stuff all the time. I have transfers from other schools where like what that people aren't following the rule, and quite honestly, the NCAA doesn't care. And I know that makes me sound like a bad guy. And again, I'm not judging. I wish we could practice in the spring. I go to Canada every 3 years and spend a lot of money so we can get those 10 practices before we go, because I think they matter. But like, just the rule right now is a joke. Because there are people who scrimmage, and it just, so if you're not going to enforce it, just let us safely do it the right way, because we demonstrate that we're able to, and every other sport can do it, every other winter and spring sport. Why can't football?
Right. Coach DeFrisco?
Yeah, Mike, I couldn't agree more about the non-traditional off-season. I always tell our head strength coach, who he trains the entire athletic department, so he's pretty busy throughout the course of the day with training our student athletes here at Illinois College. Coach said he does a great job, but he spends more time with our guys than I do. Combine the amount of time that I have with our guys, I just feel like there's an absence that the student athlete needs from the coaches, from the coaching staff. And it's not just the leadership days and they need football. They need to be doing football related activities. And I think we're a little handcuffed when it comes to some of those rules, like Mike had mentioned, particularly about practice. If you are a team that follows the letter of the rule of the law, then you are literally out there doing individual drills in Skelly. That's it.
Yep.
That's all you're doing is indie drills in Skelly. And so that's strength and conditioning. That's not football. You know what I mean? Yes, I agree that fundamentals and schemes, all those things are important to get to the schemes of, teaching them the proper techniques. But, I think that, and then, I'd also like to make a pitch to maybe a little bit easier pairings in the first round of the playoffs might be one of the other things that I would like to see. Is just, there's some conferences that, they're just they're a little bit their strength of schedule is a lot stronger than ours, and we tend to, in the Midwest Conference, get paired up with a top 10 team in the first round, and it's tough. Mm-hmm. I mean, in order for our conference and in order for conferences that are similar to the Midwest Conference to catapult their standing and to get a little bit more notoriety at the national level, we're going to have to win a first round game. But you're also talking about doing it against, number 3 Wartburg in the country or North Central or one of the top 5 teams. And that's a much larger gap. Yes, it's great that you made it to the playoffs, but you should be on a pretty, I feel like the first round should be a lot closer in the games, and I just feel like that's something that if there was a change, it'd be neat to see a little bit more competitive games in the first round.
And I think to both of your points about the spring practices, no coach is going out of their way. I mean, from the coaches I've talked to, we've all but made the game safe. It's very much an uppers and a thud level. For those of you that don't understand thud, it means you hit and you stop. You stay up on your feet, you hit and you stop. And a lot of people are doing that. That is the movement. Why? Who's going out in the spring and trying to hurt? We're not doing Oklahomas. We're not doing Bull in the Ring's gone. Like, this isn't.
I just don't understand. You can't afford it.
Right. No, who can afford to lose players? Kid?
We can't go out and buy kids in the portal.
Coach Clark, I thought I saw you had something to add. Maybe I was wrong.
No, Carl, I would just say, like, it's just trust us to do our jobs, right? They trust us to fill our beds. You know what I mean? Exactly. Look, I've talked to Ed Hoddle at Stevenson is on a lot of times, I don't know if he's on the rules committee or whatever, so he's informed. And I guess we're waiting on more concussion data, right? They gave us these changes a couple years ago where they adjusted preseason in our non-traditional. Like, that was never legislated, it just kind of happened. But again, right, when we got the 4 days of shoulder pads a couple years ago, there was never a vote at the D3 convention for that. It was just like, hey, it was part of a grander plan. Well, we get less time than everybody else. I mean, look, I'm going to Lehigh tomorrow morning. We have friends that coach at different FCS or whatever places, and I mean, their kids are there all summer, and then they start in late July, and we get 23 days is the first time you can practice, but then there have to be off days, and you really can't play in the spring. It's just, I coach the O-line, right? And so, man, like,
you need to hit. Right.
There's only Alex Gibbs, I was lucky when I was at Davidson. I got to go to Atlanta one time and spent some time, and it was awesome because a guy who was at Davidson at the time named Dave Fagg ran the Davidson Athletic Foundation, but we inducted Alex Gibbs into Davidson Hall of Fame, and I got to work my way into mini camp at the Falcons. And I went down to watch him practice, and I can't use some of the words that Alex Gibbs used, but he's like basically said, "We don't block bags, we block people." You know what I mean? And like that's what football is, it's blocking and tackling, and you can't really do those things in our spring as it's currently structured.
Right. All right, coaches, this is the final question is up to you guys. We want to hear from you. I want to know, what question do we ask the next group of 4 that are in your seats? So I will start with Coach Parsons.
I'm glad he picked you first, Todd.
Yeah, I was really hoping that would go to someone else. And, yeah, you know,
or it can be as a collective. Yeah. We could do it as a collective if you don't want to do it as.
No, you know, I think hearing these two guys talk about that change in the spring, and I mean, everyone's been a part of this. I mean, I remember when I was playing at college, we couldn't even have footballs at Avery University, and we were out there throwing dodgeballs, and they were curving all over the place. And then all of a sudden, you could, get a couple more. You could use a football, right? But then there was no helmets yet, and then there was helmets, and then there's shoulder pads. I would love to see that progression, and and everyone takes their own take on the rules and that kind of stuff, and I'd love to hear more about people get creative, right, with those things. I think one of the challenges for us, right, I don't know what other, like for us is like we're the smallest roster, right, in this conference, and I think the challenges for us sometimes as the season goes on is like when you do have injuries and that kind of stuff is how do you practice, right, when you maybe can't get a full scout team. Are you going more good versus goods? Like those are the things that I'm always intrigued by, how people are preparing right throughout the season. I know those are some of the challenges that we face right as the season goes on.
Coach DeFrisco.
I think one of the ones I would ask is in regards to like the recruitment process, and I think that it's such a fluid. It's always changing on us. The portal, the name, image, likeness, you name it. All these other factors, the trickle down effect. There's so many things on my mind about that and the impact that it has at this level, and how it's being handled at their institutions would be really good, fun information to hear about that we can potentially use for our own advantages at our own institutions if there are some creative ways to do those things. So I like where Todd was going with the how do practices go, and how do you keep your players as healthy as possible through a very long season, and which to Mike's point at the last question about the non-traditionals, like I feel like at times the NCAA has some really good rationale behind what they're thinking about, but we need the time adequate to do the violent physical sport that we do. The only way to get in condition for football is to play football. There's no weight room recipe. In order to be in condition to play football, you have to have collisions, you have to have those things. Now it's up to us as coaches to be professional and keep their head out of the equation so that they can have long lives and do what they want to do afterwards. But back to my original point it was something about the have you ever given up a recruit based on something you found out, through Twitter or through social media? Like, have you ever dropped a recruit at this level? Like D3 is known for, you take everybody, you got to fill the beds. Have you ever dropped a kid, truly said, hey, thank you, but no thank you, this is not the place for you? That'd be interesting.
Okay. And finally, Coach Clark.
Well, man, I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts on the spring, right? No one's going to acknowledge that they're not following the rule, but anyway, I don't know. I think the practice thing that Todd and Ray both brought up, we struggled with some of that at Davidson, and we sort of scouted each other. We never had a roster of really 80 there. But like, I would be intrigued. I think Ray and Todd both alluded to this, like how much good versus good are you doing? I heard Nick Saban talk about it. One of my alums is a high school coach now in the Lehigh Valley here, Andy Marino, but he's worked for some really great head coaches at Elon and Lehigh and Harvard. And at Harvard, they did a ton of good versus good stuff during the season. So, like, how do you balance, scout team reps versus I would love to hear more about that, because that's something that I'm conflicted with for this year. Like, we've done a ton of scout work and we do a little bit against each other every day outside of Thursday. Mm-hmm. But once you're in season, how are people really practicing? I'd love to hear more about that. The team reps.
Right. Well, coaches, I want to say thank you. I want to remind everybody, first and foremost, you can catch Dingo Talk and all of these coaches' episodes. You can go to our YouTube page and find their episodes, or you can tune in every Thursday at 10 a.m. There's a new show coming. It's Voices in the Stands. Producer Matt, who's not pictured in the screen, but it's just a group of us that are going to talk Division III from a different perspective. And then for everybody involved and for everybody at home, please consider being a part of and supporting QBs versus Cancer. Carter St. John has done a phenomenal job with that foundation. So make sure you guys, if you haven't yet, it's qbsversus.com. Buy a T-shirt, donate. And again, coaches, I want to say thank you very much for being a part of the first From the Sidelines coaches roundtable that we had. I'm sorry to Coach Dean Paul. We just couldn't get it to work on our side, or on your side and our side. So we'll try to have you on later on. But I really appreciate you guys stopping by, and we'll see you next time.
You can ask Coach Perk and Coach Pete what they like to run on 3rd and 7. I would appreciate that.
Same thing with Benzel.
Yeah.
I can get you. I'll ask that question.
We have a play called the Hopkins Special. We stole it.
We had a school in our conference who started practice on a Wednesday last year, and their first day of class was the next Monday. And I think personally that's getting into safety issues with the...
But, I feel like if we can schedule right, if we can schedule strength of schedule well and get our MPI high enough, I think winning this conference would allow us to get in as an at-large for these next 2 to 3 years, however long it takes until we get an AQ. And
fortunate to make a playoff run this past year, and we were practicing at 6:30 in the morning because guys had thermodynamics exams at 9 a.m. that day, and it's just that prepares you for life. As life throws you curveballs, and you got to adjust.
Thanks for checking out this episode of Dingo Talk. Don't forget to rate, comment, and subscribe. For more info and to contact the show, you can find us on Twitter @Dingo Talk.